Paris Mountain State Park in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm Ranger Kathy Taylor. When 5th graders come to Paris Mountain State Park, they are our scientists for the day, and what they find out goes into our records here at Paris Mountain. We'll be figuring out about this place together today. You will be our scientist. And what kind of scientist will you be? Well, you're going to be an ecologist today. We know that eco is a Greek word that means home, and ology is the study of, so we're studying homes here. And more specifically, we can say that as an ecologist, you'll be looking at the relationships between the living and non-living parts of this place, figuring out if we have good homes here. And I'm going to go ahead and say your main goal today is to figure out why forests are fantastic. What's so fantastic about forests? Because you're going to be a forest ecologist, looking at the living and non-living parts of a forest today. And to do that, you'll kind of need to be like a detective, looking for clues all around you. We'll have stations along the way where we will stop and figure out more and more about being an ecologist and about this place. And we'll end up around on the other side of the lake, getting to know just a small part of the forest, up close and personal, as we practice being an ecologist. You will need your forest ecology field study sheet today. Where it says ecologist, that's you, so you can write your name there. We'll be using this sheet as we walk around Lake Placid, figuring out what's so fantastic about forests. After we practice being forest ecologists as we walk around the lake, we'll use the other side of the sheet, or page 2, to do a 1 square meter investigation of the forest. Well, scientists, we made it to Station 1 on the long bridge at Paris Mountain State Park. Let's see what clues we can observe that will tell us a little bit about this forest. Would you say that it's more hilly or flat here at Paris Mountain, from what you can see? Well, we are on a mountain, right? So we expect it to be more hilly. We know that there are high points and low points on a mountain. And also we know that the water carves paths through the forest, allowing the water to get through the creeks and into our lakes. We know that processes are at work to make it very hilly here. What about, is there more sun or more shade? Or is there shade? Yes, why do we have shade here? Well, we have the trees, right? And they provide shade. So that says something about our forest. What about the soil that we have here? Well, we could take a look at the soil up close. And at the top layer here, we can see that it's very dark. And I see nuts here, and leaves, and rocks. If we start looking around this particular area at the bridge, we're going to see that we have some trees that have been uprooted. About 2 weeks ago, there was a big wind event, and trees were toppled over by the wind, and some trees crashed into each other. And so we ended up with a big mess, but it also gave us a chance as ecologists to see what is underneath a tree. We have a tree here that came down, and a big mass of roots and soil came up with it. So we see a massive root system, and we can also see where the topsoil is darker, the layer that is formed by the leaves that come down and whatever else falls to the ground, versus the deeper part that is more consisting of red clay. And that soil is formed at least partly by the minerals that are here that break down, sort of rust really, and make red clay. Tell me, scientists, what makes this forest different from a forest, say, in Alaska or in a tropical rainforest in Central America? Well, there are factors like temperature. We know it'd be more extremely cold sometimes in Alaska than here, right? Or the amount of rainfall. We know that we would not get as much rainfall here in a year as a tropical rainforest. How about the amount of sunlight? And the rocks here make a difference. The pH or acidity of the soil makes a difference. So all of these non-living factors determine what animals and plants can live in our forest versus another forest where they're better suited. Well, do any of you know a word that scientists use for non-living parts of a place? Abiotic. We say that non-living parts of a place are abiotic. And so how about the living parts? Well, biotic. Bio means life, like in the word biology, the study of life. So we have biotic, living parts of this place, and abiotic, non-living parts. On your field sheet for Station 1, it asks, what is your favorite abiotic factor? Now, that doesn't sound like something a scientist has to record, but you might have a favorite abiotic factor now that we're thinking about them. I know I like sunshine. We'll say sunlight. But you might have another one. What is your favorite biotic factor? It asks. Now there are so many possible animals and plants out there. Let's say for a forest around here, what would you expect to be your favorite living part of this place? I mean, I like frogs, so I probably would write frogs down. You might have a different biotic factor that you want to comment on or write down. For Station 2, we're going to think about how forests grow and change over time. Basically, you go from sun-loving plants to increasingly shade-loving plants in the growth of a forest. Do any of you know of a green lawn somewhere in your neighborhood? And have you ever seen a green lawn that sort of let go for a while and nobody mowed it for a while? You start to see more and more plants, but these are sun-loving plants that do fine out in the open. And then over time, you start to get bigger plants that love sun, certain shrubbery, some certain bushes. And then some of the first trees that you might get would be the pine trees. They're still sun-loving trees, but they start to shade the other plants, and some shade-loving plants start to grow. So we call this forest succession. Ooh, we found some Canada geese near our forest. We also have a pine tree, so tall, reaching toward the sun. That tells us something about this forest, as does the oaks right nearby. In forest succession, sun-loving plants are succeeded by increasingly shade-loving plants. And the pine trees are sun-loving plants. But it doesn't start with pine trees. After all, a forest doesn't grow overnight, does it? On our field sheet for Station 2, it says, in forest succession, sun-loving plants are succeeded by increasingly shade-loving plants. What abiotic factor are we talking about here? What do the early plants love the most? Well, you write that down, what factor you think is involved, and we will head to Station 3. Wait, did someone say they saw a snake? As we approach this area, of course, our eyes are drawn to the water going over the dam. But let's look at forest succession going all around us too. We have some low-growing plants, grasses, and others, and that's kept trimmed back by the rangers. And then we have some taller plants with vines and shrubs trying to become a forest. This is a great place for sun-loving plants and insects like butterflies. So if the rangers left this area alone, what would it become? It would become a full-fledged forest over time with forest succession. So we have tall pine trees and large oaks and hickories as well. And then we have the trees that really do best under the shade of other trees like dogwoods and sourwoods. Forest succession is going on everywhere. Well, scientists, we're at Station 3. We're looking at the dam at Lake Placid. It was built well over 100 years ago, in fact in 1898. So why was it built? Well, to make a lake. You've seen the lake. But why was the lake built? Well, it was to provide water for the growing town of Greenville, South Carolina. People knew that if they could protect the land, the forest specifically, around Mountain Creek, and if they could make lakes from Mountain Creek, they could have healthy water. And they did. So this is one of 4 dams for the 4 lakes here at Paris Mountain State Park. We could say that water is a limiting factor. In other words, it is needed for everything to live, and you can only have as many species of a certain type of animal or species in an area if you have enough water for them. When there isn't enough water, animals die. So water is important for living, right? How have you used water today? Did you drink some water? Did you brush your teeth with water? Maybe you took a shower or a bath. Maybe you washed your hands or you washed something else. We all use water. What else does every living thing need to live? Well, besides water, you know there's food, right? Shelter, space. These are all limiting factors. You can only have as many as there of certain species as there is the food, water, shelter, or space for. On our sheet, it says name an abiotic factor that is also a limiting factor. In other words, it limits the number of people or other species that can survive in an area. So, while we mentioned 4 limiting factors, which one are you going to write down right now? While we're talking about water, I can think of something really fantastic about forests. Just think about the water cycle. We know that the plants in the forest take in water for their use, and then they release water, which comes into the atmosphere. We're talking about the water cycle, right? Rain clouds form, and the water comes down as rain. And we already said everything needs water to live. So forests make that happen. Look what we found on the way to Station 4. It's a little turtle. Actually, this turtle looks like the one sometimes called the stink pot. I'm sorry you can't smell it right now, but you can imagine. And it doesn't get very big. This one's smaller than full size, but it doesn't get to be a very big turtle. Let's take a look here. Oh, it's opening its mouth. Wow, cool. Wow. We will continue on to Station 4. Well, we made it to the other side of the lake, scientists. at Station 4. Do you see the black box behind us? Do you know what might use that box? Clues are it flies at night and it's not a bird. Are you thinking bat? Well, that is a bat box. So that was put up by a Boy Scout years ago. If you were looking to see if we have bats as an ecologist, what clues would you use? Well, you could come out at night and look for them. And you could also look for bat scat, or bat guano it's called. In other words, when bats go to the bathroom, you could find the droppings possibly. So why would an ecologist want to know if bats were here? Well, it's just one of the many species that are part of this place. Forest ecologists talk about populations of animals and plants that live in a certain place. If we know what kind of bat we have, say little brown bats, that is a kind of bat, then we can say we have a population of little brown bats here. Population being a certain species that is found in a certain place. There's also another box here that a Girl Scout put up. Zoomed in, do you see it? What big animal that flies at night, and it is a bird, would use this box? If you're thinking owl, you're right. I want to show you something else. What is it? Well, this is an owl pellet. Some of you may have dissected one before. When an owl is getting ready to fly at night, it first coughs up an owl pellet consisting of the bones and fur of a mouse that it ate the night before, or whatever it ate. The owl makes use of the nutrients from the rest of the mouse, but not the bones and fur. So this is a great find if you're out in a forest, and it's especially helpful if you know where an owl lives. So why would an ecologist want to dissect one of these? Well, it helps them know about the owl populations in an area and what the owls are eating. It also helps them know what kind of mammal populations for small mammals like mice or shrews or voles, all of which an owl might eat. For Station 4 on our field sheet, it says individuals of one species that live in a specific area form a what? Starts with the letter P. Once you've written that down, let's head to Station 5. Look what we have here today. We were talking about owls, and we have a population of barred owls here. This is a barred owl. Ranger Wilson told me that he'd just seen him fly over into this tree, so I rushed right over.